Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Simply Be Sustainable. My name is Brooke Chase. I am your host, and today I am so excited to have this episode and welcome a very special guest. We are having Maria Vaughn of CORcomposting on to talk to us about composting. Now, this is an episode that I've wanted to do for a very long time. And the reason is because there is so much going on in waste world with the things that we should be composting. So basically today, what we're going to be talking about is why composting is important, what it means, the do's and don'ts of composting. We're going to answer some questions that you guys have asked and some questions that I have to ask, and all with a very special guest and an expert in composting, Maria Vaughn of CORcompost. She is certified in commercial scale composting operations through U.S. Composting Council. She has 5 years of experience in establishing a community composting program here in the city of Savannah. She is a mom of 3 and a hairdresser, and she's pretty awesome. And she's been in commercial and residential composting ever since 2019. So everyone, please give Maria such a warm welcome. Hey, Maria.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You are so welcome. I'm so glad that you were able to join us. I know last time we tried to record this, we had some technical difficulties, which I pray that we have taken care of.
Please,
Um,
please.
yeah, so today we're going to learn all about composting. So I like to kick things off on the show with some simple truths, just to try to bring it home as to why this stuff is important and why we should really start caring about this stuff. So the average United States household generates 650 pounds of compostable materials each year. Over 60% of what we're throwing in our landfills could be composted. If we would reduce our garbage with collection costs, municipalities would save money on the transporting and disposing of all of this waste when organic matter is eliminated from the collection systems. So that alone would alleviate a lot. An estimated 8 to 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions are associated with food that is not consumed. And to put that into perspective, if food waste was a country, it would have the third highest greenhouse gas emissions in the world, only after the United States and China. So, those numbers are pretty crazy. And what can we do about it, right? The answer is don't throw things that are compostable, which are also known as organic matter, into your garbage, and instead compost them, right?
Absolutely.
So for me, I'll say I really kind of wanted to start this journey, but I was very intimidated. I thought there was going to be like a science to all of this. And it made me not start for a long time. And I feel like there's probably a lot of people that are in a similar situation. So today I just want to really talk about this on a very like high level, like, talk to me like I'm brand new at this, and just let's try to get everybody accustomed to, what composting is and how easy it is to do this. And I guarantee you now my dogs are going to have a shit show. That's going to be fantastic. Okay. What is composting?
Composting is basically the decomposition process of organic material. For instance, if you were to have, like if you were to look in the forest, the leaves when they're spent and they fall on the ground, they break down with microorganisms and they turn back into soil, rich nutrient soil, so they can feed the trees once again for the next cycle. And with our society, when we have byproducts, when we have waste, and I say waste, it's not really waste, but when we have these byproducts of organic materials or raw materials, if we mimic the kind of same system that nature has and feed that back to the microorganisms, then we can turn that back into soil and benefit, our gardening processes again.
Right. And like, even if you didn't do anything with it, it's a matter of not like filling up the landfill, right? Like, because when you put it in the
Absolutely.
landfill, Yeah, because, and this is something that I didn't know about, but like when you throw all that stuff that is not waste that we just don't want, right? Like the tops of the
Hmm.
carrots and things like that, and you put it in the landfill, they crunch it down and there's no oxygen in there, so it can't like decompose, right? And so the difference
Absolutely.
is like we're not letting it decay naturally and letting like the bugs and things take care of it and eat it and then it's just like gone and then like used. It's it's depleting the rest of the things, right?
Yeah. And actually, in a landfill, because it's devoid of that oxygen, you get a lot of harmful gases, like you were talking about with the different emissions that, um, you know, freely are going into our atmosphere and not being utilized. It's causing a lot of pollution to our communities. So, when we view it as a waste, then it becomes a waste, and
Right.
the longevity of the landfill is compromised. But when we view it as a natural resource instead, and that's what we need to like start changing our mindset
I love
towards,
that.
is
Yeah.
it's not waste anymore. It's,
Yeah.
like at least 50% of our material. A study was actually done from a college student with his thesis for Savannah, and he was able, with his research, to see that 70% of the material that was going in the Savannah landfill was compostable material. That's a huge amount of material that is not being utilized that could be going on all of our parks. I mean, we have, over 20
Yeah.
parks just
That's giving me
downtown,
goosebumps.
and
Yeah.
yeah, so it's crazy. It's really, it's like, it's environmental, it's social, as far as our future.
Like
And
economic. I mean,
it, yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It's really about also like efficiency. Like it's actually,
yeah.
we're losing money when we're
Right.
carting this all around and putting it in a useless pile, when we can actually be using it as a resource for our community again. And that means resilience, for our
I love that.
community. And that's why we started all of this, actually, is because, we saw that. And when you see results with something, when you see the visual, we're such visual people, and when you see the difference that it makes, and you see how simple it is, then you want to be able to inspire other people to do that. It's like, it's empowerment.
Yes.
And that's what composting is. It's like, it's very empowering, because you can actually make a difference. And I feel like, with the news, it's very dismal a lot, and there's not a lot of hope. There's a lot of fear, and everything is driven by fear. And with this, it's different. It's like, you have a place, and your small steps, they don't have to be perfect, but every little thing that you do, as simple as that, like keeping your resources on your property, can make a huge difference. And all of that accumulated can change like
Well,
the
that's
way
the trick,
things are done.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Everybody needs to do
That's
it.
the premise of this entire show is that like you as one person, it's very simple, but together it makes a big difference. So, and I just want to, there's so many segues there. So, we're talking about what is so bad about not composting, and we've talked about what composting is. And so the simple swap of this week is to simply save your scraps, right? Like every time you have something that is quote unquote compostable, and I would suggest for anyone to start small, right? So let's, for the sake of
Absolutely.
today, for just asking people to just start, simply start, is like when you cut off the top of a carrot, don't throw it away, like save it, right? And so, and for me, I know when I started, like it was hard for me to remember, like I would forget, but now it's so second nature to me. I'm like, oh, you can come back. And I saw your video. Oh, you can come back. So it's like when you're making dinner, just whatever you're using that's food, instead of throwing it into the garbage, throw it in a different plastic bag and stick it in the freezer. Stick it if you want to do a compost and put it on your countertop, go right to that. But if you're like weary or you don't, say you don't even have a container, like just use any kind of bag and just stick it in the freezer. And you're going to see how quickly like you accumulate these things, and your garbage is going to be so much smaller, and it's going to be addictive and fun, like I swear, because your garbage isn't going to be heavy, it's not going to be stinky, it's not going to be all these things, and you're going to have these luscious nutrients instead. So not to get all nerded out on compost already, really quick, very easy for us to do here. Really quick, tell us about your company, and what exactly you guys do. So what is Core Compost?
Okay. Yeah. So we founded Code of Return or Core Compost, all on that basis of regeneration. Everything about the name symbolizes what we're trying to accomplish. Because we saw that with our society, it's such a linear system. Like we buy, consume, and dispose, and it's just a start and an end. And with nature, it's all circular, and nature doesn't have any waste. Composting is the process of regenerating that back, so we can continue to do the same, so we can sustain ourselves. It's
Right.
all about the essential of living, really. And so, Code of Return, is all about returning back to nature. And so we found that there were a lot of people that either, just like mowing your lawn, you hire services for that. Sometimes either you don't have the time or you just don't want to do it. And so we
Mm-hmm.
started this business as a means to be able to provide services for people. So they either didn't have to do it or they couldn't. Some people live in apartments, or say larger accounts like restaurants, they have to dispose of their waste, and it's a large, you're talking about tons of waste every single week. And their only option is to just put it in the regular trash. So we actually started with businesses first, and we work with over 25 businesses downtown Savannah, including like
Mm-hmm.
3 hotels actually. So, we have something from small, like little coffee shops, to hotels, and we go around every week. We pick up that material and we bring it back to our farm, and then we also work with tree services as well, because it's
Oh,
not something
really?
people think about a lot, but um, with when the tree services go around and they trim up all these trees, or even take down a tree and they chip it
Oh,
up.
you take that too.
And that also could be going, to a landfill or not being utilized as well. And so that's our source of carbon. So we do like 50% at least of food waste, and then also 50% or maybe even double that with our carbon source.
Preaching.
So
That's so
yes.
interesting. So you're saying like a tree service, if they come, for the city or whomever, they would take all of those trees and throw them into the landfill typically?
In the past, yes. I believe in since the 90s
That's
with Georgia,
so
they
crazy.
actually made it illegal where you could not put wood chips or like, carbon sources, tree trimmings, yard
Yeah.
waste in the landfill. They're not supposed to.
It's
Um,
like so big and already so like, I don't know. I feel like you just dump it anywhere and it would just go back into the earth. Like, why put it in the landfill? That sounds crazy to me.
I
Um,
know. It's
oh,
well, there's a lot of things to that for sure, but the thing is
yeah,
like with when it comes to the waste industry, the material cost every single time it's moved. Somebody has to go pick that up, and they pay for employees and equipment, and it's time. And so, yeah, to incentivize tree services to work with us, we actually tell them drop it to us for free, because when they take it to some of
yeah.
these inert places that are not landfills,
Uh,
but for carbon, they pay, and some of them have told me they pay easily like $200 a truckload to just dispose of it.
wow.
So
Yeah. You
when
needed
people
any.
think about like the cost of like their services, like their trash services and stuff like that, there's a reason why these things do cost, to be able to be maintained, because there's so many moving parts with it. And that's what we have to get people to kind of realize with the way we're working as well. um, we have had a little bit of feedback with that, as far as people are like, you're charging people to take our trash, and I'm like, That's kind of how that has always worked.
Oh,
It's a
yeah.
service.
Yeah.
I think, because you're doing
Um,
something environmental and you're passionate about it, you should just do it for free.
okay.
So
I'm not
those are things we're
that.
trying to get past as far as awareness, like understanding like the value of it. Like you're paying for a
Yeah.
trash service, like with restaurants, like switch over to us instead. We will have competitive, maybe even cheaper prices for this sort of
Than the
service.
garbage.
And then we can even give
Yeah.
you finished compost back. A lot of these hotels, like actually, if you look at Perry Lane Hotel, um, we just brought them 4 yards of compost. All of their landscaping and planter boxes and stuff on their rooftop, the roof,
Uh-huh.
is our compost, actually.
That's great. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
so it's super cool. And that's a good PR move as well when it comes to commercial accounts, like, hey, food to
Yeah.
table, farm to table, table back to farm. We're doing the complete circle, and we actually have something to show for it, you know?
Yeah.
So that's super.
That's awesome. So, okay, so there's many different types of composting. If you're someone that's just getting started, say, you've never done this before, you're just doing what I said, like the minimum where you're taking the tops of your carrots, the greens of your strawberries, the ends of your onions, things like that, and you're just putting them in like a plastic bag in the freezer, say, okay. What's like the next step to if you want to compost at your house?
Yeah, so I would recommend, like you were saying, starting out small. Like a lot of people, they get excited, which is awesome, but they try to go out and buy, a several $100 piece of
Well,
tumbler or something like that. Exactly. So
cool.
we've recommended when we've uh, taught workshops or anything of that sort, like, um, you know, get a piece of fencing, like a fencing panel from Lowe's or Home Depot,
Uh-huh.
say about 8 to 10 feet in length, and zip tie that together into a circle. So you have just like
Uh-huh.
sort of a barrier to keep all of that material together.
So it'd be like
And
hair like this.
yeah, just wire and then like,
Yeah. Okay.
form it together into a circle and then like zip tie it or tie it together. And,
Mm-hmm.
try to find also like maybe a lid of some sort to fit over that. Basically because you do want to make sure you're not attracting animals and animals aren't, getting into the material and tearing it all over your yard, basically. But that's all you need. You just need some sort of containment, and it can be as simple as just like a few dollars investment
I just
to
have
have
a
that.
5-gallon bucket.
Yeah. So the biggest thing is like just think that like with the landfill as well, like you want to make sure you have air. So like use your bucket to collect the material. But when
Uh,
you're actually doing the active process of composting, you want to make sure you have air. That's
mm-hmm.
really, really important for the success of composting. Um, imagine
Okay.
like so you create your containment area of, something very simple, and you want to
Mm-hmm.
make sure 100% before you get started with all of the greens, that you have brown material, and that can be leaves in your backyard, the pine needles, little twigs, and things like that. You want to kind of break those pieces up. But if you don't really have a lot of brown material in your backyard, I always recommend just getting a bale of hay at your local feed store or like a Tractor
Mm-hmm.
Supply or something like that. That
I
goes a
love that.
really long way. So basically, stage your area. Make sure you have the brown material first because that's going to be the main success of your composting, because you need to have at least equal amounts of that. And that is what's going to counteract all the different things that people get leery about with composting, like smells and attracting
Right.
things.
Yes.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yes.
Okay.
So, like your
So we've got
air and
scraps.
browns.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
So we've got scraps. No, you're fine. So we have scraps. They're in the freezer. Every time the little freezer bag gets full, where do I put them? You can either put them in the 5-gallon bucket, or you can put them in that like circular thing you're talking about.
Hmm.
Whenever the 5-gallon bucket thing gets full, or the other thing gets full, wherever you're putting them, that's when you're going to add your brown matter. And you're saying that the ratio is basically like 50-50, right?
Yes. So I always like to give a visual with this and say, pretend like you're building an Oreo cookie. So, you have your crunchy outer layers, and those are your browns, basically. That's your like cookie crust. So, when you go to do your composting and you actually go to drop your greens, which is your ooey gooey center, layer down the browns first, and then pocket those greens in, all of your food scraps and everything, and then you always want to make sure you cover. Um, you can stir that material first, like so, layer it down, cover it, and then kind of stir that up. But then always make sure you have that
Mhm.
material covered pretty well,
Top
where you
cover.
don't see
Yes.
food. That's like the essential thing. You
Right.
do not see the food because your browns are that's nature's biofilter, basically. So that's going to
It's
like
like the
absorb
leaf
all those
covering of the
smells.
top, basically.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's going to absorb all the smells. That's going to take away any of the, odors and everything that people are concerned about. And when people talk to me about these things, like that's usually one of the main markers whenever I talk to them is you have all the food scraps, you're collecting all that material, but they hardly ever have enough carbon. So, stage that, make sure you have your container of some
I mean,
sort.
buying a hay bale is like the simplest and best idea I've heard. I mean, I have so many leaves that fall from trees around that I don't need that. I know, like, depending on what resources you have, like you might have like if your husband or boyfriend or you does like woodworking and you have wood chips, like
Hmm.
you can use what you have. A question that I have for you, I have been getting, oh, actually, I think I could show you. Hold on. Well, it's just a cardboard box that my toilet paper comes in that says it's compostable. And then of course, you have like Amazon boxes and people have paper and all kinds of things like that. If you like rip that up, is that also brown matter?
Absolutely. Yeah. So,
Okay.
anything that's like fiber material. So if it grew from trees or like, dried up plant residues of some sort. So like your cardboard and things like that. You just want to make sure with like newspapers, paper, don't use any of the glossy stuff, but any of your
Mm-hmm.
like just more natural paper-based materials, just rip that up because it will kind of when it gets wet, it will sort of bind together and it won't break down very
Mm-hmm.
easily.
Okay.
So,
And that's a good point. So, like, how small do you need to like rip it up? And then, as far as like rainfall and stuff, like, how much do you need to stir it or like wet it or whatever?
um, so what I always say with all of it, you're feeding the microorganisms and they're living creatures. So just like everything, just like us, we need air, food, and water. So imagine with the moisture content, the moisture helps them move around in the material. Like that's that kind of the
Mm-hmm.
film, the liquid
That
film for
makes
them to
sense.
move around. Um, but you don't want to drown them. If it's too wet, if it's sopping wet, if you go to like take a rake or something, whatever you're mixing the material with, you can actually get these kind of cool
Mm-hmm.
compost aerators like on Amazon for I think maybe like $40 or something. And it's just like a pole with a handle and they have like little spikes. So if you have a bigger
Oh,
pile, you
you just have
turn
to
it and
put
just
like
kind
some
of
holes
lift
in
it.
it.
Like you just
Yeah.
turn it and kind of lift it, and that's much easier than
Okay.
like shoveling or raking in my opinion, but
Oh, okay.
yeah, so when you're mixing it up, if it's like sopping wet, if it's dripping, like you have too much moisture, so you just want to make sure you add more browns in
Uh-huh.
there just to kind of like think when you're cooking with things, like that batter or whatever,
Yeah.
like you don't want it to be drenched because then you are drowning them
Yeah.
and that will kill them off. And then that also is what makes those smells, the ammonia and kind of
Oh, that
sulfury,
makes
yucky
sense.
smells, because it's the
Huh?
die-off of all the microorganisms. So, yeah.
So, and I'll just give my well, okay. So my simple confession is that I've never actually gotten compost because every time I make compost, I've had to move. And honestly, it will probably happen to me here also because I don't want to live here forever. I want to like buy a house one day, but I still compost.
Yeah,
But
I know.
basically,
It's
what
great.
my foolproof method. I mean, when I say I haven't gotten compost, I have compost. It's just not like fully decomposed to be dirt yet. You know what I mean? And if I wanted to use it, I could have. I just like I didn't really need it, so I didn't. But like, so I would use I would take the scraps and leave them in either on the countertop or in the freezer. And then when that gets full, I transfer it to a 5 gallon bucket, right? Now you can drill
Hmm.
holes in the bottom and then use that liquid. And then that also gives you the oxygen that you were talking about so that that can get in. And
Yeah,
then
yeah. If you're
you can
going to
use
use a
that
container
liquid
like
to
that.
grow your garden. Yeah, and I love that. But I just like was too lazy and I never had a drill and I just never did that. But instead I just like let it and I guess they call this hot composting. But so the 5 gallon bucket would get full and it would be like so sludgy because it's been in there for God knows how many months. And then
Hmm.
I at one point would take that bucket to you guys, and then you guys, if you have a service like Core Compost, would give me back like X amount of compost in exchange for that poundage of, waste, or not waste, we'll call it like raw materials, right?
Yes.
Now, if you're doing your own compost, yeah. So then if you do your own compost, whenever that 5 gallon bucket gets full, you basically have the same amount every time, right? So then you make your sandwich where you put your leaves and brown matter on the bottom. You pour that 5 gallon bucket on the top. Then you cover it back up with the other brown matter. And then I would stir it up and then do a covering over top and then just leave it there. And then every
Hmm.
time that 5 gallon bucket got full, I would do it again. So I really only mess with the thing every couple of months until I moved. No, but and then in about a year is when you really reap the benefits of that. Which I mean, if you think about it, it's not that long. But what I think about is how much garbage that is that didn't go in my garbage every day, every week, every month, and for the whole year into the landfill that there went nothing but caused a problem. And here I have this pile of nutrient rich compost. So it's really like, what's your reason? I feel like, but
Hmm.
either way, it's easy as shit. Like, it's so easy.
Yeah. And with
Um,
us, our motto is, compost no matter your time, space, or budget. So, especially if you live in an urban city, almost, I would say the majority of the cities across the country now have some kind of composting service, or look
yep.
into your community gardens as well.
Yeah.
Like a lot of your community gardens have like composting bins and things like that, and maybe you can
Yep.
make use of that. But with us, we have services where we go around and we pick up the material, but we also have free services as well, those self-serve stations like you were talking about, and they're accessible all
Oh, or you
throughout the
can
week.
stop it.
And you just collect your material like you said, if you want to put it in the freezer, if you want to put it in a bin, and then when you're ready, like when you have a full container, you just take it to
Uh
our
huh.
stations and dump it, and we take care of it for you. So like I said, no
That's
excuses,
awesome.
because that was the thing, like with residents, that's why we started out with residents, because in all like technical um, ways, like you want to be able to try to keep the material on your own property if you can. That's the most environmental, right? Because there's no moving parts with fuel and moving that around. But when
Yeah.
you are in an urban area, you may live in an apartment and you don't have a backyard space to do that at all. So people were coming up to
Mm-hmm.
us when we started and we were just working with businesses, and they were like, well, I live in an apartment. I don't have a backyard. Like, what can I do? Like, I want to be able to have a place in this and do something environmental. Even if they're not into gardening, they want to do it for an environmental reason, and that's so
Yeah.
important. So, we have those free stations, and we have services where we come and we like pick it up for you, we take care of it, and we give you compost back. So that's like a really big selling point for gardeners, because it's like,
Yeah.
hey, like this is all taken care of for me, and then I reap the benefits of this product, and then I just put it back in my garden, and it's great.
I love that.
So, there's so many different options, but I would definitely, if you're not here in Savannah, I would check out your local community check out to see what's happening in the community gardens. A lot of community gardens do not have enough help when it comes to like managing the
Mhm.
gardens and so on. So, maybe this could be like some good advocacy to like get you more involved with your community, and that resilience of the community, with growing your own food. And that's how you're going to learn more as well. So like, get a bin, like a community bin system started, or work with a compost company in your area if it's in your area.
That's awesome. Okay, so let's say you're doing the compost thing, you've been doing it for a little while. What are some key signs you're doing it, but you're doing it not well? Like, is there some kind of like red flag, like something's wrong here?
I think our noses are pretty good indicators of like something that's not that great. When you have smelly things, like I said, um, then so when it comes to composting, if your material is getting really stinky, like then you need to check and make sure you have enough browns, like I said, or that your material is not too wet. Almost always the solution is like stirring it, like aerating it and adding more browns, like
Mhm.
always. If you're in a certain area and you don't get a lot of rainfall, you might need to add water. Here, like you shouldn't have to probably even ever need to add any water just because we get a lot, we get like
Mhm.
average 50 inches of rain a year. So like more than likely
Yeah.
you're gonna just be like aerating, like just stirring the material, like getting that air, there's those air pockets back in there, and just adding browns. And so that's basically the biggest thing I would say, when it comes to the success.
So
And
is
just
there
like
anything like besides smell?
um
I
maybe
mean, I've
like
never
animal,
seen anything that was wrong with mine. If you're
yeah. No, not really. I mean, it's pretty, like I said, it's fairly simple. Like if you are incorporating the right amount of materials, um, then the process is working. And like I said, the smell is going to indicate whether or not you're doing it correctly. And I say correctly, like especially if you're really wanting good soil, like and you're into gardening, like
Mhm.
if your compost is smelly, like that's means that you're like harboring pathogens and things like that more. Because that's what happens when things go anaerobic. You start getting more of the bad guys instead of the good guys. And you put
Mm.
that in around your plants, and you're going to have more diseases and things like that. So if you're really trying to like create a system where you're growing your own food and you're taking care of your own waste, you want to make sure you don't have smelly compost. Um, but like I said,
Yeah.
it's so
Let's just
simple. Like,
yeah. I mean, I really don't think anyone's I was going to say I've been doing this for probably almost 10 years now. Has it been that long? That's crazy. And I mean, the smell is like there is a smell when you dump the stuff that's
the
old and
the
sludgy from a
food,
5-gallon bucket
yeah,
that's been sitting there in a bunch of months. But
yeah,
it's not once you cover it up with the brown matter. So it's like a very
yeah.
sweet, like nasty kind of smell, but at the same time, it doesn't like smell like something's wrong. Like it smells like,
Well, that's what I was gonna
garbage.
say.
Or
Like your food itself is gonna be a little smelly, especially if you are collecting it for a period of time. I like your method, like you said, when
right.
you keep it in the freezer first, and then or something like that.
Mhm.
Like either keep it in the freezer or have a smaller container, where you're not holding onto that material like trapped in a container for a long period of time. And then just when
Yeah.
that's full, then do your process. And I see what you're doing with like trying to eliminate having to like, build your pile so frequently. And there's nothing really wrong with that, but you are going to have, that's where you're going to have the smells when you're like
Yeah.
having the actual food materials like
Because
stewing
for
up.
me, it was just blood at that point. Right.
Yeah. It
Now, I
turns
will say
sludgy.
that since then, I've upped the ante on my compost game, and now I have a tumbler, right? And so now, I know it's so exciting. So now I don't have a 5-gallon bucket. Well, actually, I do because I had one from before, and I need to do something with it. But I'm like afraid of it because it's been in there for so long. It's still there, and eventually I'm going to use it because it's going to be very nutritious.
Yeah.
Well, I have a tumbler, right? And so, every time my little scrappy thing that I keep in the refrigerator is full, it's like, a little ice
Mhm.
bin with a handle. I just pour it in that thing, and that's not like stinky at all. And I haven't even added brown matter to that yet. So, it just depends on the method. And so let's just tell everybody really quick, like things that you should and shouldn't compost.
Well, if you're just composting in your backyard and you want to keep it very simple, then you're going to incorporate your like fruits and veggies, your grains, any kind of grain-based material, say teas, spices, coffee grounds, the filters, as long as they're like, paper filters or any kind of
Mm-hmm.
paper-based products,
Mm-hmm.
eggshells, basically most of your food items, a lot of people, like I said, they do sway away from meats, like or protein based, like higher protein based structures, and that's mostly just because it does attract more animals or vectors into your backyard, and it does take
Okay.
longer to break down. But like like I had said previously, if it grows, it goes. So
Okay.
it
So
just takes
it's just
it just takes longer to break down, really.
should I
What'd
just
you say?
start putting should I start putting like bones and like
Yeah, I mean, you can put everything
that?
in there. Yeah,
Really?
absolutely. Like
Like,
literally everything that was once living. I don't know if you've seen as far as uh, news updates with, I think New York is implementing it and California, but they're, trying to encourage human composting and as far as burials, where, family members can opt to do that instead of being buried in a coffin and taking up space in a cemetery, they can just be returned back to the earth. So yeah, technically, if it's living, it can be composted and it all turns back into the same thing. It's just a matter of time. So
like, do you get buried like without a coffin, or you get thrown in a landfill? Like, what are you saying?
haven't been to one of these facilities yet that's doing it, so I'm not sure 100% how they're doing it. But if you think about it, it's like we're kind of the only creatures that are, you know,
Boxes. We're
we're
gonna have to talk
yeah,
about.
we're not adding or contributing our nutrients back into the earth, which is kind of crazy. Like we're literally pumping ourselves with formaldehyde and preserving our bodies like with
Oh my god,
chemicals
that's so
and then
true. I thought about
pouring into
that.
a wooden coffin and then being buried on a site that is like utilizing land, and I mean to
I
each their
never
own.
thought.
But like, the most natural way,
God,
or I would say the most kind of, it sounds kind of icky, but like respectful way that I think you can put put your body back to the earth is to, be be composted basically. Or I've seen also where people do like pods, like
I
so basically
did that. I told
you're put in like
Trey.
you're put into a pod, like kind of like in the fetal position, like just like how you're born, you go back to, that sort of, position. And then they plant a tree over. I like that concept actually a lot.
Exactly
They
what
plant a
they
tree
do.
over you and then the roots, grow around you. I think like that gives me
Ah,
goosebumps. That's how I
I
want
love
to
it.
go actually. Yeah, I think that's so
Like
cool.
my hope is that I get to live long enough that like I have like grandchildren and they can like swing from my branches. Like,
I mean, and imagine how much more beautiful that is than I mean cemetery, it's not that cemeteries aren't pretty, but like instead of all these gravestones, you have like this forest that you can walk through and remember your family members by. I think that's cool.
I think we're onto something with that. I love that. All right, so some things that you should not throw in. Number one thing for me is like they always said like laundry lint, and I thought but then I found out about like microplastics. So for me, laundry lint is a no, right?
Yes. So basically plastics are like our biggest enemy. Like,
So I'm not laundry lint
yeah,
in my
because the majority of our material, our clothing materials now are made with plastics. So, or just some kind of, blend for sure of plastic.
right.
So, The lint is definitely going to have all of this microplastic, so you don't want to incorporate that
Right.
in. Yeah, basically,
Okay,
and
so
this is
now,
where I'm going to say waste or trash, like don't put trash in your compost. So anything that's
right. No plastics.
packaging, like your produce stickers, like people kind of forget about that. Those do not break down. They're made out of plastic, like a vinyl. So make sure you take off your produce stickers, make sure you take off those little ties or whatever that's like plastic based.
Mhm.
Most of them are plastic based off of your
Yep.
veggies and fruits. And of
So
course,
how about
it sounds simple, but we have this a lot, especially when we do public events and things like that. Um, no glass, no aluminum, no um, plastic, of course, styrofoam, any of those packaging materials. Don't put that in your piles, of course.
right? Okay. How about napkins, tissues, paper towels?
Yes, you can put those in
Right?
there as well.
Paper towels, toilet paper. Yes, right?
Yeah, yes. And the rolls, toilet paper, paper towel rolls.
Hairballs, like hair lint, like
Oh,
from your
oh
hairbrush.
yeah, yeah. Technically, yes. Hair, like I said, if you have fibers that are all natural, so like your hair, like 100% cotton and all of that, that will break down. It does take a
Mhm.
lot longer, but you can put it in.
When do you think, if you do all this, that you'll have some kind of compost, like finished product?
So if you're, stirring the pile and incorporating these things, you're going to start getting some heat and everything will be working really efficiently. If everything is working really well like that, like I said, as that simple process, you can have finished compost in about 5 or 6 months. Some people wait about a year just to ensure that it is going to be finished, and I think that's a good 100% safe marker. But
Mhm.
like I said, your visual, your smell, those are going to really indicate whether or not something is finished. So obviously, if you're continuously adding something, whatever new that you're adding, like
Mhm.
you're not going to factor that in. So you might have to move that off if
And that's
you have it on a
why
pile.
mine has two sides, right?
Yes, yeah. So with a tumbler, it's like, have the one side and then start adding into the other side. So you're not continuously adding something because if you're continuously adding it, it's not going to finish completely. And if you're like just stacking it in a
Oh,
pile, maybe remove that top part just initially, get into like what has been sitting for a few months. And if it's, crumbly, earthy, dark, soil matter, and you smell it and it smells like you're walking on a nature trail and you're in the forest and it smells earthy, like anybody who's like walked in the forest, they know that yummy earthy smell. It's so intoxicating. I think it's just like very therapeutic. That means you are finished. Like you don't see any food, like you don't want to see any food particles. It smells earthy and it looks like soil. Like it's good.
yeah.
You have compost.
Oh, yay. I'm so excited for mine. So, one last question. So, before I switch to the other side, like how long should I add to one side before I switch to the other side? Like until it's like full or like a couple of months, or I guess it just depends on like whatever I want.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, you base it on your volume. So if it takes, I would do it mostly full. As long as, you can still, it's still able to stir and you have air in there, and it can actually tumble around, then get it to
Mm-hmm.
basically where it's mostly full, but it still moves and it's not like, it's not compressed and lodged, and then start on the other side. Yeah.
Okay. And I should add the brown matter every time I do a little bucket of my food scraps, or wait till it's full and then, or halfway full and then add brown matter for the tumbler.
Yeah, just worry about adding the brown matter when you incorporate the food or if you go to check on it. And you're mostly going to be checking on it when you're adding food. If, like I said, you need to counteract something because it's too wet or smelly or something.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you don't have to
Okay, this
worry about that.
cool. All right, well, I am
Woohoo!
so excited. I hope we have inspired people to start saving their scraps and that instead of throwing them in the landfill. For me, it really was the catalyst to my sustainable journey and my like zero waste plastic free journey, because I had such little garbage that I was like, how much more, like how low can I go, right? And
Yeah.
that's when I really started like refusing a lot of packaging and things like that. So I really hope that this episode has inspired some people to start saving those scraps, which is your simple swap of the week. Hopefully you will never have to confess that you just move every time you get some compost. Stay put or take it with you or something. Or join a fabulous service like CORcompost in your local area or local community garden. Thank you all so much for listening. Maria, tell everybody how they can find you. So if they want to use your services or ask you any questions or just follow along with CORcompost.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Check us out on our website, CORcompost.com, or Instagram at CORcompost. And when I say core too, it stands for Code of Return, so it's just COR, not CORE.
Yep. CORcompost. CORcompost.
CORcompost.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I just want to end with a couple of great quotes. I think these were from your website, but never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. The health of soil, planet, animal, and man is one and indivisible. The earth is what we all have in common. So just remember that alone we do a little, but together we simply do more. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I hope that you will start saving those scraps. Bye.
You can compost that.
I love